Travis Schreier, the BamaOnline.com staff, following the media viewing periods at Wednesday's football practice at the University of Alabama. The Crimson Tide going through day 3 of Spring Drills 2019, transitioning into shoulder pads for Wednesday's workout. Helmets and shoulder pads following a couple of practices to get going in shorts and helmets, and a couple of welcomed additions out on the practice field today. You'll see this in Charlie Potter's practice report, which will be up in a moment in a series of seconds, in a matter of seconds, I'm sure, there at BamaOnline.com. But Ali Cahoe, the sophomore inside linebacker, back on the practice field today, sporting a pretty good sleeve on that left knee, but looked to be going through individual drills with the rest of the inside linebackers. Pete Golding, who was announced, by the way, on Wednesday, a nice little bump up in salary for Pete Golding, now the standalone defensive coordinator for the Alabama Crimson Tide, going to be paid that way, up over $1 million per season for Pete Golding. We saw the contracts for Steve Sarkisian approved today. The rest of that staff totaling a little bit north of $7.5 million for Alabama's on-the-field assistants, and then also the ever-important Scott Cochran getting a little bit of a bump up to just under $600,000 per year. So you had some contract news that hit your timelines, I'm sure, hit the message boards there at BamaOnline.com, that roundtable. You always want to be there. But Ali Cahoe working with those inside linebackers today. When I saw him, he was paired up with Shane Lee, the early enrollee. You still had Dylan Moses, Josh McMillan paired together, Markel Benton, Jalen Moody, another second-year player, were paired together in that inside linebackers group. But good to see Ali Cahoe back with those inside linebackers. We also saw Kedrick James back on the practice field today, so that was a welcome sight. You also had Cameron Latu continuing to work with those tight ends, and we're going to have a lot of video coming up for you from practice. Made the walk around today. We were able to get over there with Steve Sarkisian and those quarterbacks and receivers, so we'll have some of that for you on the website coming up in a little bit, as far as Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, Taulia Tagovailoa, Paul Tyson, working with Steve Sarkisian, and also working with those outstanding wide receivers and the tight ends, which are going to be an important part of things, an important storyline with the loss of not only Irv Smith Jr., but also Hale Hinches. Saw Major Tennyson out there moving around pretty good. Miller Forrestall, obviously, in that group. Latu, Michael Parker. So we'll have some more video of that for you coming up in just a little bit on the website. Now, from an injury standpoint, Shyheim Carter continued to work in a black non-contact jersey, but he was with the safeties while we were out there. Got a pretty good look at the safeties working with Charles Kelly, another one of those new assistants. The group that we saw, in order at least, during individual drills, didn't see Shyheim Carter doing everything in those drills. So you had Xavier McKinney up first. You had Jared Maiden following McKinney. You had Daniel Wright. And you had Eddie Smith. So those were the 4 guys. But Shyheim did mix in with some of the some of the drill work they were doing as a unit on the back end before we were shushed out of practice, shooed away from practice on Wednesday. But that was kind of your group. At the corners, same thing there. Still Patrick Surtain, the second. Still Trayvon Diggs. Josh Jobe trying to become more of a factor at that position. Jalen Armour-Davis going through drills coming off that ACL injury back in the fall. Nigel Knott, early enrollee. Scooby Carter. So those were your guys primarily working at the corner spot. So I was kind of over and around the way a little bit. That was the area that I focused on the most today. So didn't really check out the offensive line or the defensive line as much. We obviously did that on Bama Online on Monday. So that was kind of the look I had of practice. That's the notes that I would certainly say stood out the most to me anyway. Getting Cahoe back on the practice field, Kedrick James back on the practice field, Shyheim Carter continuing to work even in a black non-contact jersey. So it was good news, I would say, in terms of the return of a couple players, especially at positions where you're trying to figure some things out. What do you got for me? Anything? By the way, we're at Coleman Coliseum. We're in less than 2 hours NIT action. March Madness, baby. Norfolk State coming in to take on the Crimson Tide right inside that building right there, Coleman Coliseum. I thought they should just play this one at Foster Auditorium. Capacity 3,800. Might have a pretty good environment in there. Good atmosphere. What do you got for me? Anything? Cameron's already wanting to break down Taulia Tagovailoa and Paul Tyson. I got to see both of them a pretty good bit today. I'd say they're comparable. They're different in terms of their measurables, obviously. Taulia right around 6 foot, maybe a little bit under. Paul Tyson more that classic Jake Coker sort of looking prospect. Big frame, good arm, gets the ball out pretty quickly. I thought they were, just going on today, and they're throwing out there in individual drills. I thought they were pretty comparable, and they're both getting a lot of work right behind Mac Jones and Tua right now. And you still have Braxton Barker, a walk-on out there. Lane Hatcher's out there with that group. The quarterbacks as a whole, I thought, looked pretty good today. I mean, you would think with the talent they've accumulated at the position that would be the case throwing against air, and that's kind of the way it is. The secondary as a whole, it's kind of a work in progress. I think Shyheim Carter isn't going to be the guy that draft analysts talk about as much for 2019, but in terms of importance and his versatility, I think he's going to be the guy to watch, because I think wherever he ends up is going to be where they feel like they have something to cover for, whether that's at corner, whether that's at star. I think more so at star and then safety. Is Shyheim Carter going to be the other safety in the base to and maybe even in the nickel? If Josh Jobe steps up at corner and frees that up a little bit, maybe we see Trayvon Diggs continue at star again this year, and Shyheim's able to play some safety more. But if it doesn't work out that way, Shyheim Carter can handle that star role. So I think he's the guy, the sort of glue guy back there in that secondary. I think your top two corners you feel really good about, in Diggs and Surtain. Again, the development of a guy like Josh Jobe and how quickly Scooby Carter can come along. Jalen Armour-Davis coming off the injury. How that sort of sorts out with the top three corners, but then at safety too. I mean, right now it's Xavier McKinney and kind of everybody else. The guy I would feel most comfortable with after Xavier McKinney would be Shyheim Carter. But Jared Maiden looks like he's had a really good offseason. Daniel Wright's back in the mix. And then, Eddie Smith could factor in that as well. Yeah, Kevin, there's always a possibility that one of those corners could move to safety. I mean, how many times have we seen it? Eddie Jackson did it. I'd say it worked out pretty well for Eddie Jackson. Minkah Fitzpatrick played all over the secondary. We've seen it plenty with guys making that conversion. Yeah, I'm not sure about Ben Davis kicking the ball, Jim. Not so sure about that. Yeah, Jacory, we talked about inside linebacker a lot as far as the concerns there. Middle linebacker, I don't think you're as concerned because Dylan Moses is stepping into that role now. The concern there is if something happens to Dylan Moses behind him. But right now it looks like Josh McMillan is the guy they trust the most, which makes sense. He's a fifth-year senior, always been known as a bright, intelligent guy, always knows where he's supposed to be, when he's supposed to be there, maybe a little bit limited athletically when you start talking about making plays in space and in coverage. So there's going to be a lot of competition at that other spot. Matt, the running backs are a group that we still haven't been able to get a great look at. Najee obviously being back, Brian Robinson coming back, Jerome Ford being in that group. That's kind of your three right now. You're going to get Trey Sanders in here in the summer. Still going to be a really good group. I think Najee obviously comes into the spring as the top guy, but I don't think the gap is such that Brian Robinson's going to be limited to totally sort of this complementary status. I could see Brian Robinson being a 110, 120 carry kind of guy. Yeah, Kevin, we haven't seen Nigel really play the star all that much. He's been almost exclusively a corner to this point. We do see a lot of guys rotate into that star position, but Nigel's not really a guy that we've seen work there a good bit. Stan's asking about the center position. Chris Owens looks like he's on the clock there, Stan. He's a guy that, again, like some of these other guys, been in the program for a while, so he certainly understands what's to be expected. He should be at a point in terms of his understanding of the system and what the guys around him need to do, not only his own job, but to make those calls and checks. Chris Owens should be at a point where mentally, cerebrally, he can handle that. Now, you know, is he up to the task physically? You know, from a talent standpoint, there's no reason to think he isn't. We just haven't seen him do it, you know, over an extended stretch against the elite players in the Southeastern Conference. But right now, I would say, you know, it's been Chris Owens so far. Yeah, I don't know what's up with Michael Parker and the weight deal. You know, you look out there at him on the practice field right now, and you kind of see a guy that is at a little bit of a deficit from that standpoint, especially when you talk about the blocking aspect of the position. So he's got a little ground to cover there. Wide receivers, Brandon? Yeah, I think they're going to be okay. You know, Jerry Jeudy out there today, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, all those guys look supremely healthy. Jalen Waddle, Terrell Shavers, Xavier Williams. Yeah, they're in. John Mechie has joined the group now as an early enrollee. They're in a pretty good place right now. Safety, Shannon, we just talked about that. If I had to guess right now, the top two safeties, Xavier McKinney, obviously, but I think Shyheim Carter might be more of a safety right now, although, you know, he can obviously slide down to that star position. And then you're looking at Jaron Maiden, and then Daniel Wright or Eddie Smith. That's kind of the way it's breaking down right now. Yeah, I'm not going to rule anybody out when it comes to that interior offensive line right now. So with Evan Neal, you know, the thing I wondered about him coming in is because he's such a large human being, similar to DJ Fluker back in 2009. You know, the concern with DJ, I think DJ was close to 400 pounds maybe, though, when he got here. That's not Evan Neal. Evan Neal looks good. He's just a big dude. So you wonder about the stamina and the ability to maintain that at the college level or at the Alabama level, which is obviously different than a lot of other places. But if he can do that, I think he's got a chance. I like Emil Ekiyor. He's got sort of that prototype center guard build, powerful. You know, so I think he's certainly in that mix. You know, if Deonte Brown was in a better situation, he would obviously be one of those two guards. But Matt Womack, you love his experience. So, you know, they don't have a lot of game reps on the books at guard and center. But guys like Chris Owens have been around a long time. Matt Womack's been around a long time. So that makes you feel better about the situation. Susie, we haven't really seen enough of the kicking game so far to kind of get a good feel for that. You know, obviously Will Reichard has jumped in there. He's anticipated to provide a push, if nothing else. I think he's capable of even more than that, taking on a role of some sort between field goals, kickoffs, punting. He's competing in all those areas. Joseph Bulovas obviously had his struggles with PATs at times last season, but he made 14 of 18 field goals, including 3 of 3 from 40 to 49. So there was some good things from Joseph Bulovas. He should be able to improve on some things this offseason as well. So, you know, I think punting, as much as anything, is where Alabama had as big a drop-off as they've had. And that's going to happen when you go from J.K. Scott to anyone. But, you know, they went from about 45, 46 a punt to around 38 at best last year. That's nearly a first down worth of yardage every time you punt the ball when you go from J.K. Scott to the next guy. So that's a bigger concern. You got some kickoff return guys you need to look at. Punt returns, you're obviously in great shape with Jalen Waddle. Jim wants a shout out. There you go, Jim. You got it.